All right, so we are going to get into the 10 Commandments series. This is part 1. We will be breaking down all 10 commandments. The first video that was uploaded on this channel was the 10 commandments with the original names restored in them. So now we are going to take a detailed look, breaking down each commandment one by one in this series. Let's talk about it. In the first commandment, Yahweh says in Exodus chapter 20 verse 3, "You shall have no other gods before me." Now, what does have no other gods before him actually mean? We want to go to the scriptures and allow the scriptures to interpret themselves. That way we avoid inserting our opinion and allow the Bible, allow the scriptures to speak to us, and we can understand what they mean and what they say. Throughout the scriptures, you're going to see a consistent theme, but you have to start to research them and seek understanding and be humble enough to receive what it's actually saying. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 2. We're going to take a look at what was going on in the garden with Adam when Yah commanded him. Okay? When it comes to the original name of Yahweh, some people say Yahweh, some people say Yahuwah. I just want you to make note of something. A lot of this stuff in terms of the difference of opinion boils down to the vowels people are using when they are interpreting the older manuscripts and the ancient manuscripts, and how they are choosing to form the pronunciations and what letters they see present based on their text. When people see the term God, some people say Allahayim, some people say Elohim, how people are choosing to pronounce these words. Same thing with the Messiah's name. When you see, some people will say Yahawashai, some people will say Yahusha. That's what you have to understand. But the scriptures are consistent and clear, and there's a constant theme that, no matter how much changing is going on, will always remain the same. And there is a short form of Yahweh. You will hear Yah. People will also call him Yah. Y-A-H. All right, so Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. Then Yahweh Elohim took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to tend and keep it. And Yahweh Elohim commanded the man, saying, "Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day you eat of it you shall surely die." So Yah was very clear when he commanded Adam. He said, the moment you feed of that tree, the moment you eat of that tree, you will surely die. In the New Testament writings, when you hear Yahushua say things like, "You will know a tree by its fruit," that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But I want you to think about those things as we walk through and we look at the scriptures when they talk about trees and fruits. And pray for understanding that Yah will give you insight on his scriptures, because Yahushua was very clear when he told his disciples. He said, "It is known for you to get the mysteries of the kingdom, but for them, it's not known. I speak to them in parables." So just pray that Yah will open your eyes and draw you and grant you understanding. All right, let's see what starts to transpire in Genesis chapter 3. Let's start at verse 4. The command has been given. Adam knows what's going on. Eve knows what's going on. So now we're going to see how the devil starts to play games with Eve. Eve, aka Kawa. Then the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die. For Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like Elohim, knowing good and evil." So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. So they ate of it. They were not covered anymore. Adam and Hawa, Adam and Eve, they disobeyed the commands of Yah, and immediately they knew they messed up. Violation of Yah's commands. Now watch this. So there was the trap. The serpent said, Yah knows the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like Elohim. In essence, he was saying, you'll be as gods. You'll have the knowledge of good and evil. You'll know good and evil. I mean, sold it to him, hook, line, and sinker. Deception is telling you a lie and making you believe that it's true. That's one of the definitions of deception. And deception is also false teachings that will cause you to stray in error from the truth. So when the serpent was referring to knowing good and evil, what he sold to him, that bill of goods, when he was referring to knowing good and evil, that word know in this context means this. In Genesis 4, where that word know, it's the same Hebrew word in Genesis 4:1. The same word used here when the scriptures say in Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain and said, I have acquired a man from Yahweh. So when he knew her, she conceived, got pregnant, and bore Cain. So this knowing was an intimate knowing, and a child was born. So you see this word know right here, the Hebrew word yada, how it's spelled here. It means to know, learn to know, perceive and see, find out and discern, to discriminate, distinguish, to know by experience, to recognize, admit, acknowledge, confess, consider, to be acquainted with, to know a person carnally, to know how, be skillful in, to have knowledge, to be wise. Those are a few definitions in this word. This word is loaded, and he commanded them at the end of the day. And so when Adam knew his wife and conceived and bore a child, that's consistent with scripture. And we're going to take a look at that impact, because Yah told him what would happen if he ate of that tree. And we're going to take a look at what happened and what he said and how this impacts a person when they are disobeying the commandments of Yah. Remember, Yah told Adam in Genesis 2:17, in the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Okay? Now, let's look at an example of how these things play out even in modern day life when it comes to violating Yah's law, when it comes to violating Yah's commandments. Okay? James chapter 1 verse 15. Let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by Elohim. For Elohim, whose name is Yah, cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Then, when desire has conceived, see that? There's that word conceived. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, brings forth death. Remember, sin is the violation of the law. So let's take a look at what the definition of sin is according to the Bible. 1 John chapter 3 verse 4. Whoever commits sin also commits lawlessness, and sin is lawlessness. Another way you can look at that word lawlessness, when you break it down, it says transgression of the law. So John is saying whoever commits sin also commits lawlessness, and sin is transgression of the law. So when you sin, you are transgressing the law. You are transgressing the law of Yah. The law is the Torah. It says the word Torah right there. It also says instruction. It also says direction of Yah. So the law is the Torah, instructions, and directions of Yah. When saying Torah, some pronounce it Thura, Thara, Tura, or Thawara. Torah also means custom, manner, in Deuteronomy, or the Mosaic law. Sin is disobeying the instructions, the law, the Thawara of Yahweh. That's what sin is, when you disobey the instructions in the law of Yah. So, according to what we just read, James said, you conceive and you give birth to death. You bring forth death when you sin, or when you violate the Thawara, when you violate the law of Yah, you sin, and it gets full blown and it brings forth death. That's what we see happening, because Yah told Adam, in that day you eat, you'll surely die. Let's take a look at what the Messiah has to say, and we're going to put it up against the commandment. Matthew chapter 6 verse 22. Yahushua says, the lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? You see that? That's garden talk. That's Genesis talk. No one can serve two masters. Here we go. Watch this. Here we go. Watch this. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve Elohim and Mammon. If your eye is good, or if your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. There's good and evil at play here. Okay? So Yahushua breaks that down, and then in the context of serving two masters, and then he starts talking about you can't serve Yah and Mammon, because these riches were becoming gods to them. Okay? So in the garden, they were only supposed to serve Yah. They weren't supposed to serve the serpent. They weren't supposed to serve the devil. They tried to do both. They got Yah's commandments, but then they started listening to what the serpent had to say. They had another god before Yahweh. They put another god before Yahweh. They were also exalting themselves, because if you idolize yourself, or if you exalt yourself, or if you have this self-worship mentality, you have turned yourself into a god, and you can't even put yourself before Yah. You shall have no other gods before me. Where it says in Exodus 20, you shall have no other gods before me. That word panim, how it's pronounced here and said here, it's his presence, okay? That's the short version. His face, his presence. But this word before, all, we're going to take a look at that when he says, you shall not have any other gods before him. Let's look at this word before. So Yahweh was saying to them, you shall not have any gods upon my presence, on the ground of my presence, according to my presence, on account of my presence, on behalf of my presence, concerning my presence, beside my presence, in addition to my presence, together with my presence, beyond my presence, above my presence, over, by, onto, towards, or against my presence. You shall not have any gods on the basis of my presence, on account of my presence, because of my presence, for the sake of my presence, in spite of my presence, notwithstanding my presence, concerning my presence, in the matter of my presence, as regard of my presence, above my presence, beyond my presence, over my presence. You are not even supposed to have gods over of elevation or preeminence in my presence. Don't have none of that stuff in my face. Doesn't matter how you slice it. Yah was very specific with his children, with the children of Israel, on not having any other gods before him. And Adam and Eve, they violated that when the serpent came to them and fed them the deception, fed Eve the deception of saying, you'll be like gods, you'll be as gods. And a person can make themselves a god through their vanity, through their self-worship. Even in Revelation 22, it says in verse 14, blessed are they that do his commandments, so they'll have right to the tree of life. Right back to the Genesis talk, right back to the garden talk. So in part 2, we'll take a look at the next commandment.